Mm, great. Thank you. I would like to share with you one of the greatest fears that I overcame. One of the greatest fears in my life was that I was afraid to die alone and that no one would be there to hold me when I died. And it wasn't only that I was afraid to die alone, but I was actually afraid to be alone in life. I was one of those people that had a cell phone attached to my ears at all times. And when I really learned how to love myself, I learned how to face my greatest fear, and I learned how to tell a better feeling story about being alone. I was no longer afraid to die alone. As a matter of fact, there are times when I would actually prefer it. So I got into this business about 14 years ago. And the reason this facing your greatest fear is so important to me, because I've worked with cancer patients and their families. Probably over 1,000 interviews, and part of what I do is working with patients and their families at end of life. Now, every one of us here tonight most likely has some fear around end of life, some big, some small. But isn't it amazing how many conversations we actually have around the birth of a child? You know, we ask the expecting mother, when are you due? How are you feeling? There are traditions created. It is a multi-million-dollar industry. Parents-to-be spend months preparing for Lamaze classes. Friends and families create baby showers. They buy those cute little pajamas along with the furniture to make sure that the baby's room looks just right. So wouldn't it be amazing if we actually put as much thought and time into the first chapter of our life as we did the last chapter? I got into this profession when my brother Kent was diagnosed with leukemia. My family and I spent 3 months with him in a bone marrow transplant ward. It was during that period of time that I got into the loneliness, the isolation, the fear, the confusion that surrounds end of life. I would be going to the bathroom at 3 a.m., and I would see a 16-year-old girl sitting with her single-parent mom who was dying, and no one was there to talk to her. She had never even had a conversation with her mother about dying. Then I met a Latino couple who were trying to process the fact that their son had just died suddenly. They spoke broken English, they were all confused, but their son did not die suddenly. They didn't even know that he was close to the end because no one was willing to have the conversation. So what is it that we don't want to have this conversation? It is costing our health system billions of dollars. Last year, Medicare spent $55 billion on patients' last 2 months of life. $55 billion. That was more than the Department of Education and the Department of Homeland Security spent independently of each other. And this was against the wishes of the American people. So let me just make this clear and ask you a simple question. How many of you here tonight would like to die strapped down in an intensive care unit with tubes, possibly a respirator? The noises would be these machines. There would be people surrounding you that you don't even know. So how many would raise your hand? Or how many of you would like to die at home or in hospice, where your pain is being managed, surrounded by your loved ones? You're not alone. 75%, though, of Americans in their life in the hospital, 20% in the ICU. Do you know that 1/2 of Medicare recipients spend the total assets of all their money, all their fortune on the last months of life, and they are actually even lucky if they keep their own home? There has got to be a cultural shift in this country around the healthcare system. I have watched it over and over again. And I really believe it's because people have never been taught how to die. They've never been given permission to have the conversations. The most amazing thing about this is working with so many patients. I see that when they actually face their greatest fear around end of life, they live life more fuller. They laugh more. My end of life patients, stage 4, they laugh. They learn to say, I love you. They get their priorities in order. They learn how to forgive over and over again. So when those last moments come, we're able to take them from a place of fear, a place of terror, and much more into this place of peace and love and acceptance. You know, it is amazing how we actually treat our pets better than we treat ourselves. I mean, when was the last time you saw a pet on life support? I mean, really? So, the beauty of helping my patients at the end of life is that they're actually given a gift. I'd like to tell you the power of a lemon meringue pie. Marilyn comes into my office one day and she shuts the door. And she said, would somebody please talk to me about dying? My husband won't talk to me about it. My doctor won't talk to me about it. I know I'm stage 4. And I said, Marilyn, what is your greatest fear? And she said, is that my life has no meaning. She said, my husband's successful, my son has gone off to school, but I actually feel empty. And I said, what do you do really well? And she said, I make an awesome lemon meringue pie. And I said, great, you go make 10 lemon meringue pies and you give them to whoever you feel deserves one. So she came back and she had given one to the school teacher after a bad day. She gave one to the bus driver. She gave one to a charity. And she says, Tina, she goes, everybody just loves my lemon meringue pies. I said, great, go make 10 more. So she went, she made 10 more, and every day she woke up with such passion. 3 months later, 200 pies. In her obituary was to our beloved lemon meringue pie lady, your recipe lives on. I'd like to tell you about Cindy. Cindy was a mother of 3, and she was awesome. She came into my office one day, and she just started to weep. And she said, Tina, she says, I am absolutely driving my kids crazy. She says, I want everything to be perfect. They have to have perfect grades. The room has to be perfect. I said, Cindy, I said, what is your greatest fear? And she said that my children will not be okay without me. And I said, what mother's fear would be that your child or children would not be okay without you? And she says, but I'm getting everybody crazy. And I said, Cindy, who do you know in your life that may have grown up without a mother or passed away at an early age? And she thought about it and she said, Tina, my mom's mom passed away when she was 5. And she said, one of my best friends' mom passed away. And I said, Cindy, I said, how did they turn out? And she said, I think my mom is awesome. And she said she has these real moments of sadness, but I think she turned out really well. And it was when Cindy faced her greatest fear that her children would not be okay without her, that they started to have more fun together. They laughed. They had more conversations. Cindy gave herself and her children one of the greatest gifts by facing her fear that they would not be okay. She gave them the gift of shared memories. So, besides loving to tell stories and loving my patients and their families, I do some serious research. And for 5 years, I worked at Duke University Medical Center. And I did research on a curriculum that I created with a colleague of mine, where we actually help the patients with their thoughts and how to transform them. We also teach visualizations, even where they imagine their perfect last day. And the 50 women that I worked with that were late-stage breast cancer patients in my research actually did these visualizations where they imagined their perfect last day. Now, you can imagine how that went over in the beginning. First of all, half of them were doing it with one eye open to see what was really going on, but when they got into it, it was just so freeing to them. And, well, just imagine. Okay, just picture this. Where would you like to be if you could be anywhere in the world on your last day? Really see that place. Like, when you're there, what would the lighting be like? Would it be in the morning? Would it be, as the sun was setting? Would it be at nighttime? In this place, what sounds would you hear? What would the air feel like? And would you be alone, or would you actually be with others? Julia, she was an amazing, amazing woman. She started the first Head Start program in eastern North Carolina. She raised 7 children. She put them all through college. And she said, Tina, she said, I really want to go in hospice. And she says, I want to go with my children around me singing Amazing Grace. And I said, great, Julia, that's really beautiful. So about a year later, Julia went into hospice. And I get a call one night from her daughter, and she said, Tina, she said, you should come over here. She said, we're all with Mom, and we're singing, and we're actually really having a wonderful time. And I went over as fast as I could. And as I was walking down the hallway, I stopped and I listened. And I heard the most beautiful verse of Amazing Grace. Julia died at peace and to music, just like she visioned. Just like so many of my patients died exactly how they visualized. But Julia gave herself, she gave her children and her grandchildren one of the most beautiful gifts, that you don't have to fear death, that death does not need to be a nightmare, that death can actually be beautiful if it's done right. And when you hear Julia's children speak about that night, you would actually think that they were speaking about the birth of a child. please meet Julia's children? Thank you. That's all. Thank you.